How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga, coming to you live today here on April 18th, officially 1 week away from the NFL Draft, from the first round of the NFL Draft. More content to come around that in the coming week. But today, I have a lot more stories to talk to you guys about, to discuss on today's episode, starting with Patrick Mahomes. Recently this week, he was named to Time Magazine's Top 100 Most Influential Peoples list. This week, he talked about it. They asked him a few questions about GOAT status, his team going forward. We're going to get into all of that on everything he said. Then later in the show, we're going to go over all the news, the details, more coming out on this Bill Belichick situation, on him getting hired, what are the reasons of him not getting hired, some underlying things that could be true. A lot could be confusing because there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm going to try and clear it all up for you guys here on today's episode, as well as talking about another quarterback, Brock Purdy. The spring training practices are going on now. I'm going to talk about what he said on the whole beginning of this whole new year, his contract situation, Brandon Ayuk, all that and more coming on today's episode. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And like I mentioned before I jump into the first segment, I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments during today's live show, to use the tip and donations link, GSMCPodcast.net, that you see there on your screen. Using this link makes me able to see your question pop up right away in my chat box. I can read your question out on air, and we can carry the conversation that way, be more engaging, a lot more conversational. It's a bit more entertaining, I think, in this way. I love engaging with you guys, so if you would please use the tip and donations link again, gsmcpodcast.net, with any of your questions or comments. It would be greatly appreciated from not only myself and this show, but all the shows across the network. And in saying that, we could start off with the first segment. Like I mentioned, Patrick Mahomes being named on the top 100 most influential people in the world, basically. This is what Time Magazine does with their special, if you would call it that. One of the most influential people in the world over the past year, winning his third Super Bowl in that run, his second consecutive Super Bowl. You can't say he hasn't earned it. He definitely has earned it, and not a lot of athletes, I feel, get recognized on here, I think. And Patrick Mahomes has just really, outside of LeBron and probably Steph Curry, are probably the biggest American sports athletes that we have, that the USA has right now at this moment. And this is a very deserving honor, recognition for Patrick Mahomes. The stats, the accolades all speak for themselves. Even if you don't know any of them, just watching him, turn on the TV during the regular season, watch him for a game or two. It all speaks for itself. You could see right away why so many people are attracted to watching him play, how successful he is, and how much he helps his team, and how much of a component he is to his team winning and having all the success that they've had. So much so that some consider him very highly. He's already being catapulted into the GOAT conversation for the last few years now, actually. He's been up there. People have been comparing him over and over to Tom Brady, all the other quarterbacks as well, Patrick Mahomes, all the greats up there, but really just Tom and Patrick, because Tom obviously has the most Super Bowls. So naturally people start looking ahead, start looking at what this could become, start predicting. And he has been in the GOAT conversation a lot over the last few years. But they asked him about it. Time Magazine asked him about the GOAT conversation right now and what he views at it right now. What are his views on it? And he basically said, you have to build a consistency of a career. You see that in any sport. I've had a great run. I think I've done a great job so far. But it's hard to take away from what Tom did for so long, what Peyton Manning did, or Aaron Rodgers. There are so many guys, they were at such a high level for such a long time. In order to be in that conversation, you have to do that on a year-to-year basis. And it's safe to say, I do agree, he has had an amazing start, as close to probably flawless as you can get. Only Tom Brady and not Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow have beaten Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs so far. If it wasn't for those two times, any time he has been in the playoffs, he probably could have made it to the Super Bowl each and every time. Which is crazy to think about the what ifs. If he made it to those Super Bowls, of course, Tom stopped him from getting to a Super Bowl, and then Tom beat him in the Super Bowl. So you start thinking about all these what ifs. What if he beat Tom in that Super Bowl? What if he got past Tom again in the AFC Championship? How would that have turned out? How differently would people talk about him now? It's pretty fascinating to think about how already he could be. He's at what, 3 right now? To have 3 more Super Bowls at his name just early on in his career would be just crazy to think about. Outstanding, extraordinary, all the adjectives you want to use. But this is how it has turned out. And not to say it's been bad, it's been anything but bad or anything like that. He has definitely been this generation's GOAT, if you want to put that label on him. This generation definitely is all trying to compete with Patrick right now. And now they're on the verge of completing even more history, adding another thing to his resume. I mentioned he just came off of his 2nd consecutive Super Bowl. Now he's on the verge of making history of being the first team to ever accomplish a 3rd consecutive Super Bowl win with the Kansas City Chiefs. There has not been a team in the Super Bowl era, that's important to point out, that has ever done that. The Chiefs are the first team to consecutive Super Bowl wins since the New England Patriots in 2023 and 2024, about 20 years ago, now up to this date, roughly. So you look at that, you think of all the great teams that have gone through the NFL that we've seen, the different time periods of the Seahawks and how dominant they were, Peyton Manning's Broncos. Then the Chiefs started getting in there. The 49ers now always in the conversation. Recently, of course, the Patriots, and even the Patriots of how good they were. They got to this point, and then once you get to this point, no one has been able to overcome it. But technically, the last time an NFL team has seen a team in the league win 3 consecutive championships was all the way back in 1965 to 1967 with the Green Bay Packers. 2 of those titles actually came before the Super Bowl era, but they are championships, not Super Bowls, technically. So it hasn't really happened yet. The Chiefs have gone as far as any team has gone in history. Now it's just a matter of getting over that hump. And you look at the team now. Last year, the narrative was that Patrick had one of the worst, or not as good, I don't say worst, like they were bad. They certainly weren't bad, but one of the just less eye-catching offenses that he has had in the past. Of course, you have Travis Kelce, but at the receiver position, you don't have any household names like Tyreek Hill, who drew all the attention, got all the matchups, and was the number 1 option for Patrick. He didn't really have that last year, and even so, he still won the Super Bowl. So now you look at it this year, and they go out and sign Marquise Brown in free agency, formerly of the Arizona Cardinals. So you have that, and adding that to this offense already with their defense. I know they lost L'Jarius Sneed, but to me, keeping Chris Jones was even more essential. They were able to do that, and I still have confidence in their defense. And Patrick Mahomes, so far from what he's seen from Marquise Brown in the throwing sessions that they have, I mentioned spring practices have just started this week for them. Mahomes even said that he could almost unlock or tap into some untapped potential with Marquise Brown that has never really been seen from him before. And he elaborated on that by saying, I think he'll be even different than you've seen him before, because I think we can utilize him in different ways than I think he's been utilized before in recent years. He's excited to see the speed. Obviously, the route running pops out at you. Mostly the speed. He was mostly a deep threat, for a vertical threat for the Baltimore Ravens more recently when he was, coming up in the NFL, drawing a lot of attention to him. In Arizona, it was still impressive, but the Cardinals are not in a good place, so he kind of lost some steam there. Now with the Chiefs, not only is it good for him, but I think the biggest thing, like Patrick alluded to there, over the middle of the field, speed, the route running is what really catches people's eyes. Using that in slot receiver scenarios, using that to complement Travis Kelce, who already owns the middle of the field, is that security blanket for Patrick. Adding another threat in the middle of the field in those slot positions, I think it's a different dynamic that they could have. Similar to Tyreek, because he could also work in the slot and work the middle of the field. And reigniting that with Marquise Brown and anybody else they bring in, I'm sure they're going to add more additions to this team. It's just going to be so much better, I think, from last year that this team, I'm just finding it hard to find any sort of issues that they could run into, any bumps in the road that they haven't already. Patrick's almost seen it all in his career, winning Super Bowls, winning MVPs and stuff like that, losing in AFC championship games. He's seen it all. So what more can teams or anybody else throw at him, barring there's no health or chemistry adjusting period that takes too long? I think those are really the only things that could stop this Chiefs team, because I'd be completely wrong if I bet against Patrick Mahomes for any reason. I think he's disproved all those doubts up to this point, and everyone with what is going on with the Rashee Rice situation and potential suspension or punishment that could happen, be handed down to him. He's been practicing with the Chiefs so far already, so nothing's been really moving on there, but it makes Marquise Brown signing even more significant because he could potentially miss some time because of all that has happened in this offseason with him and the car accident. So we don't know where that stands. I won't talk about it too much because there's not too many facts on it, on any potential punishment that could have come back. So it's still all up in the air. But that makes it even more significant for Marquise Brown to come in, learn the offense, get into a rhythm earlier. It'll help out this offense even more. And then when they have everyone together, everyone's got to watch out because this offense is a lot better just from a year ago. They still have the draft, still a lot of talent left in free agency. It could be scary, and I think this is as close as we're going to get to seeing a three-peat. I'm not going to call my shot on it yet because anything can happen in the NFL, but I don't have a good reason right now to think that the Chiefs can't get it done. Like I mentioned, I won't bet against Patrick Mahomes if it comes down to him being in the Super Bowl again. We're just going to have to wait and see how it all turns out. But to round it all off, greatly deserved as one of the most influential people in the world over the last year. He's done a lot outside of football and to just grow the sport of football. Definitely well overdue honor there for Patrick Mahomes. But in saying that, I will move on with another segment and with the show. A lot more topics to cover on today's episode. I mentioned Bill Belichick and Brock Purdy. Right after this break, we're going to come back and talk about Tua Tagovailoa and his contract extension possibility. Where do the Dolphins stand on it? Where does their GM think about when he's thinking of Tua Tagovailoa in a good light, bad light? I'll explain more after this break. You're watching the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.